Seekers of truth and builders of destiny, what if I told you that the greatest prison ever built has no bars, no walls, and no visible locks? And what if I told you that millions sit behind its invisible walls, never daring to escape because they do not even know they are imprisoned? The devil I speak of today does not carry a pitchfork nor dwell in burning pits of sulfur. No, he lives in hesitation. He breathes in doubt. He thrives in fear. He walks in the thoughts of men who have surrendered their willpower. He lives most of all in drifting. This devil, my friends, is not a myth. It is a cunning force, subtle in strategy and expert in disguise. It whispers when you should roar. It persuades when you should decide. It waits while you sleep and strikes when you are weak. And it feeds on one thing above all else, your surrender of thought. I have studied the habits of men and women who rose from ashes and dared to sculpt their destinies. I've walked beside those who built empires with nothing more than a determined mind and a definite purpose. And I have looked deep into the eyes of those who failed, not once, but endlessly, because they allowed an unseen enemy to steer the wheel of their life. The devil's cleverest trick is not convincing you that he doesn't exist. No. His cleverest trick is making you believe that you have all the time in the world, that your purpose can wait, that discipline is a burden, that tomorrow will arrive with clearer skies and better luck. He is the master of the easy path, the advocate of shortcuts, the preacher of comfort, the salesman of compromise. And how does he do it? He uses the oldest and most powerful weapon known to man: fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of illness, fear of loss, fear of the unknown. He injects it slowly into your thoughts, like poison in a sweet drink, until you begin to believe that playing small is safer than living large. He does not need to chain your limbs. He only needs to conquer your mind. But understand this, the devil holds no power that you do not give him. He cannot possess a mind that is occupied with purpose. He cannot dwell in a spirit that is backed by unwavering faith. He flees from the man who thinks for himself, who examines his fears under the bright light of reason, and who chooses action over delay. You see, every time you postpone your decision to act, every time you let the opinions of others dictate your course, every time you settle for less than what your soul demands, you place another brick in the fortress where the devil lives. But the moment you declare ownership of your thoughts, when you seize your day with a burning desire, when you stamp your life with definiteness of purpose, you become uninhabitable to the devil. You become a master. The difference between the drifting soul and the deliberate thinker is not education, money, or luck. It is simply this: one is ruled by fear, the other by faith. One surrenders control, the other seizes it. One dances with the devil, the other outwits him. Outwitting the devil is not an act of exorcism. It is a daily decision. It is to think when others follow, to act when others freeze, to choose growth over comfort, purpose over pleasure, and truth over popularity. For in every man lies both a servant and a master. The devil speaks to the servant. God speaks to the master. Which voice you obey will determine your fate. What makes the devil so dangerous is not his strength, but his subtlety. He doesn't come crashing into your life with fire and fury. He doesn't confront you in the obvious ways that make you stand up and resist. No, the devil's genius lies in his ability to slip into your mind when you are most unaware, most tired, and most vulnerable. He doesn't shout, he whispers. He doesn't demand your attention. He quietly suggests that you doubt yourself and then patiently waits as you begin to unravel from within. That whisper often sounds like your own voice. It says things like, "What if I fail?" Or "What will they think?" Or "Maybe I'm not good enough." It's a soft murmur at first, harmless, almost reasonable. It tells you to wait just a little longer before acting on your idea. It tells you that now isn't the right time, that you don't have all the information, that maybe you should play it safe just this once. And so you delay, you stall, you begin to drift. And the more you drift, the stronger the whisper becomes until it begins to sound like truth. The devil does not attack your body. He attacks your belief. He doesn't break your legs. He breaks your will. He convinces you over time that you are unworthy of great things, that others were born lucky or talented or chosen, and you were not. He paints fear as wisdom. He calls hesitation caution. He disguises insecurity as humility. And the tragedy is, most people never realize they are being manipulated because it all feels so familiar. It feels safe, it feels like them. That is his art, that is his genius. The devil doesn't push you off the cliff. He convinces you to never climb in the first place. And so people live lives of quiet surrender. Not because they are weak, but because they have been whispered to for so long that they think those whispers are their own thought. They abandon dreams not because they're too big, but because they've been told over and over again that they are too small. The whisper says, "Who are you to try something so bold?" The whisper says, "Remember the last time you failed?" The whisper says, "What if it doesn't work out?" And little by little they obey, not with resistance, not with protest, but with silence. Most men are not defeated by enemies from the outside. They are defeated by the enemy within. The voice that speaks just before action and says, "Don't." The voice that appears at the first sign of adversity and says, "See, I told you." The voice that sees opportunity and replies, "Not yet." That voice is not yours. It has been placed there by a force that fears your potential. Because once a man begins to think independently, once a woman begins to act decisively, the devil loses his grip. There are people who believe the devil is a myth, a creature of folklore or religion. But make no mistake, the devil is real. He exists not as a red figure with horns, but as a parasite of thought. He exists every time you accept less than you deserve. He exists in the lies you believe about yourself. He exists in the comfort that keeps you trapped. He exists in the excuses that sound so rational you never question them. And his favorite place to dwell is in the minds of those who do not recognize him. That is why awareness is the first step to freedom. You cannot outwit what you do not recognize. You must learn to listen closely, to observe your own inner dialogue, and to challenge the thoughts that arrive uninvited. Ask yourself, is this fear speaking or truth? Is this my intuition or insecurity? Is this hesitation justified, or is it the devil in disguise? The man who questions his fear begins to weaken the hold of the enemy. The woman who acts in spite of doubt begins to reclaim her power. Because once you see the devil for what he is, a whisper, a shadow, a manipulator, you begin to realize that his only real power was your agreement. He cannot act without your permission. He cannot move unless you stand still. He cannot win unless you retreat. And so it becomes clear, the battle is not out there, it is in here. Not with others, but with your own beliefs. Not with demons, but with doubts. The devil does not fear your strength. He fears your clarity. He fears the moment you wake up and recognize that every whisper of limitation was a lie designed to keep you tame, small, and controlled. Because once you know that, he loses his voice entirely. Drifting is not something that happens with noise or warning. It does not announce itself with a crash or call for your attention. It begins in silence, in the smallest of compromises, in the quiet delay of action. One day you wake up with a clear goal, a vivid dream, a burning idea, and then you decide to think about it a little longer. You postpone it until tomorrow. You tell yourself you'll start next week or once things are more certain. That moment, that slight hesitation, is the first step toward drifting. The drift begins when a man stops deciding. When he begins to let the day carry him instead of commanding it. When he trades intention for reaction, he lets the news, the noise, the habits of others determine the shape of his thoughts and the direction of his time. The drift does not look dangerous on the surface. In fact, it often feels relaxing, comforting. It disguises itself as a break, as rest, as normal. But it is in that false peace where the devil sets his trap. There is a reason the devil thrives in the drift. It is because drifting people are unguarded. They have no mission to protect, no purpose to defend. They are not aiming for a target, and so they are open to suggestion. They float. And the devil, who fears decisiveness more than any other trait, finds his playground in the mind of the drifter. He does not need to work hard. He simply needs to keep the person moving without direction, thinking without clarity, acting without commitment. The drifter lives in cycles. He wakes up hoping something good will happen. He waits for motivation to arrive. He waits for the right mood to do what needs to be done. He scrolls, he watches. He says yes to things that don't matter. And the days blur together. He tells himself that he's not stuck, just figuring things out. But time doesn't stop while he figures it out. Time keeps moving. Life keeps passing. And the longer he drifts, the harder it becomes to remember where he was trying to go in the first place. Nothing destroys the human spirit faster than the absence of purpose. A man without purpose becomes vulnerable to every influence around him. He is pulled by trends, manipulated by fear, and controlled by the expectations of others. He becomes a mirror reflecting the noise of the world instead of a light shining from within. And yet it happens to millions every day. Not because they are lazy or foolish, but because they underestimate the power of drifting. It does not feel evil. It does not feel dark. That's the danger of it. It feels normal. It feels like how everyone else is living. And that's exactly why it is so deadly. The world teaches people how to be busy, but not how to be intentional. It fills every moment with distraction, every screen with noise, and while the surface appears full, the soul begins to empty. That is the drift, a full schedule and an empty life. The devil fears the man who chooses, the one who wakes up and says, "This is what I will do today, this is who I am becoming, this is why I exist." That man is dangerous, because he is not floating, he is building, he is not wandering, he is walking a path. He is not seeking approval, he is driven by vision. But that kind of clarity is rare because it requires discipline, it requires solitude, it requires thinking for oneself. Most people would rather be told what to do than face the responsibility of choosing. That's what makes the drift so attractive. It removes responsibility, it removes risk. It makes you feel safe even as you waste away. And the devil whispers, "See, nothing's going wrong, you're doing fine." But he does not want you to realize that nothing is going right either. He wants you to stay in that limbo, alive but not awake, moving but not progressing. You don't drift toward greatness. You don't drift toward excellence. You don't drift toward peace, wealth, mastery, or meaning. All of those things require direction. They require vision, effort, and most of all, decision. The man who drifts hands over his power. He becomes a pawn in someone else's plan. He becomes a spectator in his own life. He trades potential for convenience, strength for comfort, and in doing so, he becomes hollow. But no one sees the drift at first. It hides in the routines that seem harmless. It hides in the passive yes. It hides in the missed opportunity dressed as a better time tomorrow. And so the drift becomes a life. 1 year, then 5, then 10. Until one day, the person looks back and realizes they never truly lived. They only reacted, they only adjusted. They never stood firm on anything long enough to see it grow. The devil does not have to destroy a man's life with tragedy. He only has to get him to drift. Because drifting is the slow death of purpose, and once purpose dies, everything else can be controlled. A man without purpose can be silenced, manipulated, enslaved. A man who drifts cannot lead. He cannot create. He cannot rise. He can only repeat. And in the repetition, he begins to forget who he was meant to be. Fear is the currency the devil uses to buy control over the minds of men. He does not need chains or weapons when fear is freely available, willingly accepted and constantly reinforced by the world. Wherever fear exists unchecked, the devil gains territory. It is his most trusted instrument because it rarely meets resistance. It disguises itself so well, sometimes as caution, sometimes as logic, often as humility, that most people do not even know when they have been bought. They walk around thinking they are safe when in truth they are enslaved. Not by some external master, but by an internal lie. Fear is not loud. It doesn't arrive with panic or explosion. It arrives in the quiet moment before a decision. It arrives as a whisper when you consider taking a risk. It speaks when you dare to step beyond your current identity. It says, "What if you're wrong? What if you fail? What if they laugh at you and you listen?" Because fear sounds like reason. It feels protective. But what it really does is rob you. Rob you of movement, of growth, of power. It wraps you in hesitation and calls it wisdom. Faith, on the other hand, is the weapon of freedom. Where fear enslaves, faith liberates. It does not remove the unknown. It faces it. Faith is not the absence of danger. It is the refusal to let danger define your actions. It is the internal voice that speaks louder than circumstance. It says, yes, it's uncertain, but I believe. It says, yes, I might fail, but I'll rise. It says, yes, they may doubt me, but I know who I am. And the moment faith enters the mind, the devil begins to retreat because faith is a force he cannot coexist with. Every time a man chooses fear, he reduces his potential. He creates a smaller version of himself, one that fits inside comfort zones, one that avoids exposure, one that cannot lead, love, or build. He justifies his shrinking with clever language. He tells himself he's being smart or responsible. But behind every excuse is fear, pulling strings like a hidden puppeteer. And as long as fear is in control, the man is not. He becomes reactive, defensive, and easily swayed. He lives in what-ifs and worst-case scenarios, never realizing that he's been tricked into caging himself. Faith is not blind. It sees the risks, but chooses to act anyway. It understands the weight of responsibility, but carries it with courage. It does not guarantee success, but it guarantees growth. Faith is the soil where bold ideas are planted. It is the fire behind every breakthrough, every revolution, every leap into the unknown that later becomes a miracle. Faith asks nothing but one thing: trust. Not in outcomes, but in your own power to meet the moment fully. The devil cannot steal your freedom. He can only convince you to surrender it, and his most effective tool for doing so is fear. Fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of rejection, fear of embarrassment, fear of standing alone. Each one is a carefully crafted illusion meant to keep you from thinking independently. Because the moment you think clearly, fear loses its grip. And when fear loses its grip, the devil loses his access. He needs you afraid, because an afraid man does not act. An afraid man waits, he avoids. He procrastinates, he overthinks. And while he does all of that, the devil builds a throne inside his indecision. But faith is motion. Faith is decisive. Faith says, "This is the way, and I will walk it." Faith acts in spite of trembling hands. It moves forward even when the path is dark. It chooses purpose over protection. And with every faithful step, the chains of fear begin to rust and break. There is no greatness without faith. No innovation, no leadership, no change. Every man or woman who ever left a mark on this world did so by overcoming the loud, convincing voice of fear with the quiet, steady voice of faith. That is why the devil attacks faith relentlessly. He surrounds it with doubt. He floods it with distraction. He tempts you to abandon it for the comfort of fear. But faith is resilient. It does not need applause or agreement. It just needs to be chosen again and again. You are not born with fear. You are taught it. You absorb it from the frightened world around you. And unless you make a conscious decision to replace it with faith, it will rule you for life. Faith must be fed, nurtured, strengthened. It is a daily discipline, not a one-time feeling. It grows in stillness, in solitude, in moments when you are honest with yourself about what you want and why you're afraid to chase it. Fear will always offer you a story, a convincing, detailed story about why it's safer to stay where you are. Faith doesn't offer a story, it offers a choice, a leap, an invitation. And though it may be terrifying at first, it is in that leap where the truth is revealed. Because the devil is not defeated in grand battles or dramatic moments. He is defeated in quiet decisions, when a man chooses faith over fear, when he says yes to his calling even while trembling, when he takes one step forward, not knowing where it will lead, but trusting that it will be better than staying still. The devil thrives in confusion. He delights in the fog of indecision, in the mental clutter that keeps men spinning in circles while time slips away. He does not need to confront you directly if he can keep you distracted. He does not need to defeat your dreams if he can bury them under a pile of conflicting thoughts, endless information, and meaningless busyness. Confusion is his camouflage, and when the mind is cluttered, the soul becomes vulnerable. Most people believe the enemy will come in moments of crisis, but the truth is more insidious. He arrives in the ordinary, in the daily fog that clouds your clarity. You sit with an idea, but instead of acting on it, you begin to debate with yourself. You ask too many questions, seek too much input, consume too many opinions. You gather knowledge but never move. You think so long about the perfect next step that you end up taking none at all. And the devil smiles because you believe you are being thorough when in truth you are being stalled. There is a point where thinking becomes avoidance, a point where planning turns into procrastination, a point where your thirst for clarity becomes the very thing that delays your progress. The devil is patient. He will wait while you chase every detail, analyze every option, run endless scenarios in your head. He knows that as long as you stay in the realm of confusion, you are harmless. You are stuck. You are inert. And a stuck man is as useful to the world as a silenced one. The devil uses confusion not only to delay action but to dilute identity. If he can make you question who you are, what you stand for, what you should do, he can weaken your foundation. Once a man is unsure of himself, he becomes easily led. He becomes addicted to the approval of others, dependent on external validation to define his worth. He becomes a leaf in the wind, tossed from trend to trend, never anchored in purpose. And all the while, he tells himself that he is simply keeping his options open, when in fact he is afraid to commit. The world is full of noise, and the devil uses that noise to drown out the signal of your intuition. He surrounds you with so many voices that your own becomes faint. He keeps you scrolling, comparing, absorbing the confusion of others until your mind becomes a maze with no exit. And once you lose touch with your inner voice, you begin to rely on the loudest voices instead. That is exactly where he wants you, guided by external chaos rather than internal truth. Simplicity is a weapon the devil fears. A clear mind, focused goal, a definite decision. These are the enemies of confusion. The man who knows what he wants is dangerous. He moves with purpose. He is not swayed by popular opinion or passing fear. He does not need to know every step before taking the first one. He understands that clarity grows in motion, not stillness. And so he acts, not because he has all the answers, but because he refuses to remain stuck in the questions. The devil uses complexity as a trap. He whispers that things are more complicated than they are, that the path must be perfect, that you must wait for the right timing, the right conditions, the right support. He piles layers upon layers of doubt until even the simplest action feels overwhelming. But the truth is, most problems are simpler than they appear. Most solutions are within reach. Most dreams are closer than you think. It is not the world that's too complex. It's your belief in its complexity that keeps you paralyzed. Confusion robs you of peace. It keeps your mind in constant motion while your life remains in place. You lie awake at night thinking, planning, second-guessing. You spend your days doing everything but the thing that matters. You fill your calendar, your screen, your thoughts, yet feel no closer to what you truly want. That is not productivity, that is captivity. And the devil sits quietly in that noise, smiling because you never noticed him enter. The antidote to confusion is decision. Even a wrong decision is often better than none, because it restores your agency. It puts you back in motion. It teaches you something. It reveals the path forward. The devil cannot work with motion. He cannot grow where there is momentum. His influence shrinks every time you choose decisively, act intentionally, or cut through the fog with a simple yes or no. He loses ground every time you stop explaining yourself to the world and start living from the inside out. Most people are waiting for perfect clarity before they move, not realizing that clarity comes from the movement itself. You do not think your way into action, you act your way into clarity. The devil's trick is to reverse that order, to convince you that you need more time, more research, more certainty. But that lie has stolen more dreams than failure ever could. The truth is, your soul already knows. Your deeper mind has already decided. The confusion is only at the surface. And that surface is where the devil does his work. There is a power so underestimated, so undervalued in today's chaotic world, that it has become almost invisible. That power is thought, focused, disciplined, intentional thought. Not the scattered daydreams of an idle mind, nor the reactive noise created by fear and external influence. I speak of pure, creative thought, the kind that builds empires, heals nations, and shapes destinies. It is through the faculty of thought that man either rises to dominion over life or falls into the clutches of failure and regret. And it is through this same sacred faculty that the devil seeks to gain dominion. Not by force, but by subtle interference. The devil's greatest fear is a mind under conscious direction, a mind that refuses to entertain useless worries, idle gossip, and negative influences. A mind that thinks with purpose. Such a mind becomes a fortress. It cannot be invaded. It cannot be bent. It becomes a beacon, radiating energy and determination that shapes not only its own future, but influences the lives of others. But how often do people live this way? Rarely. Because most people do not control their minds. Their minds control them. They are moved by the winds of social pressure, media noise, emotional chaos, and fleeting desires. And in that mental disorder, the devil finds his workshop. When a man fails to direct his thoughts, they begin to direct him. When he fails to define his beliefs, the world defines them for him. When he leaves his mind open to everything, he becomes master of nothing. That is how the devil gains his grip, not with evil temptations or dramatic crises, but with idle thinking. When you allow random, disorganized, anxious thoughts to live rent-free in your mind, you invite confusion, doubt, and fear to rule. And the devil knows this. He does not need to push you off course if he can simply crowd your mind so much that you forget there was a course to begin with. But here is the beautiful truth. Your mind can become your greatest ally, your most loyal servant, your most powerful tool, if you train it, if you claim it, if you direct it every day with purpose. The mind is like a garden. Left untended, weeds will grow. Left in the hands of others, it will be used for their gain, not yours. But when you plant ideas deliberately, when you water your goals daily with discipline and faith, when you weed out fear and gossip and negativity, you create a garden of abundance. And from that garden comes everything worth having. The first act of reclaiming your mind is silence. The solitude, reflection. You must step back from the noise of the world. You must disconnect from the constant flow of opinions and chaos and return to the stillness where your true thoughts live. There is genius within you, but it cannot shout over the world. It waits in silence. It waits to be called forth with attention and trust. It waits for you to say, "This is my life. I will not live it on autopilot. I will think deliberately. I will create intentionally. I will decide who I am." You have within you the power to design your days, to shape your thinking, to build habits of thought that repel the devil's influence. You can think thoughts of wealth, of health, of purpose, of courage. And by thinking them consistently, you shape reality around you. This is not fantasy. It is a universal law. What you dwell on expands. What you obsess over becomes magnetic. The universe bends to the clarity of a focused mind. But only a few ever experience this power because most never take the time to think. They react, they copy, they consume. And in doing so, they trade away the godlike power of their own mind. Every great achievement began as a single thought. Every invention, every movement, every transformation in human history was first born in the still chamber of a mind that refused to drift. The man who claims control over his thoughts becomes immune to manipulation. He becomes immune to the devil's most subtle tricks. He can look fear in the eye and choose faith. He can hear criticism and choose persistence. He can see failure and still choose hope. That is not magic. It is mental mastery. This is the final truth the devil hopes you never realize. He cannot touch a disciplined mind. He can tempt, he can whisper, he can scatter seeds of doubt, but only you can choose to let those seeds take root. And when you stop allowing the devil to rent space in your mind, he is evicted forever. He flees from the soul that thinks with clarity, acts with courage, and walks with vision. So I urge you now, not just to listen, but to act. To reclaim your greatest gift, your mind. To guard it, shape it, sharpen it. Because your life will never rise higher than your thoughts. And when you begin to think on purpose, you begin to live on purpose. Let that be the new standard. Let that be the revolution. And if you find power in these words, if they awaken something deep within you, then stay connected with our channel, Oliver Napoleon Hill. Here we speak not to entertain your ears, but to awaken your soul. We build voices that tear through the fog of mediocrity and call you back to mastery. The world has drifted long enough. Now is the time to rise. Now is the time to think. Now is the time to live.